Good evening, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I am your host, as always, Tony Defio, and I am very pleased that you're joining me tonight. Before I get started, as always, I'd like to encourage you to please like and subscribe our YouTube channel, our Behind the Steel Curtain YouTube channel, where we bring you live shows each and every day. There's this show. There's the Steelers Hangover with Brian Anthony Davis and yours truly every Monday night at 8. There's the Scobro Show with Dave Schofield and his brother Rich every Tuesday night. There's the Curtain Call with Michael Beck and Jeffrey Benedict every Wednesday. There's the Steelers Preview with Jeff Hartman, Dave Schofield, and Brian Anthony Davis every Thursday. There's Touchdown Under with Matty Peverall and Mark Davison every Saturday. There's Tales from 2 a.m. every Sunday morning with Brian Anthony Davis. And, of course, we have our audio-only shows, and which include the Live Mic with Jeff Hartman. That's 3 days a week, 3 mornings every week. There's the Steelers Retro Show with yours truly and Brian Anthony Davis. Did I say Live Mic? I meant to say Live Mic is Michael Beck's. I'm sorry. Live Mic is Michael Beck. And Jeff Hartman is Let's Ride. That's the famous Let's Ride with Jeff Hartman. And that's 3 days a week, 3 mornings every week. There's the War Room with Matty Peverall. There is the Stat Geek with Dave Schofield. And we're going to have plenty more. We have a lot more content coming your way as far as podcasts in the very near future. So please check those out. They're audio only, and you can catch all of our shows, the live shows, the audio only, on any audio platform: iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes. They're all wherever you can find podcasts. You'll find us. We're growing in popularity. We're growing as far as Steelers podcast. Just Google Steelers podcast. You'll find us at the top of the list. And of course, we're also on Facebook Live. I always forget to mention that. Well, I don't always, but I forgot tonight. We're on simultaneously live on both YouTube and Facebook. So I thank you all for joining me on Facebook and YouTube. And please also check out Behind the Steel Curtain, the website, where we bring you news, commentary, film breakdown, everything you need Steelers related. We have it for you. And please check that out. And also thank you for joining me, everybody, in the live chat. And we have two of the Aussie gents. I believe I saw them in the live chat, Matty Peverall and Mark Davison. So, wow, I'm honored because those guys are superstars. Danny Owen, Stacey Lynch, Jared Devil, Dave Shipley, Steelers Pittsburgh, George Teston, Jared Devil, Joseph Brown. Joseph Brown, I have to put this up there so I can really get going for tonight. And he says, Tony, you're my favorite. We don't always agree, but you are the realist. Wow, I'm a realist. Some people say I'm too optimistic. Some people say I'm too negative. I don't know what I am, but I guess if you mash it all together, I'm a realist. So thank you, Joseph. So Steelers Fan 36 joins us. So let's get started, shall we? And the first thing I want to talk about, as the title suggests, is the big quote of the week. And that was from Matt Canada. I believe it was on Tuesday. Mark Caboli, all those, every news outlet, every blog, every Steelers anything posted the "We're going to do what Ben wants to do" quote from Matt Canada. It was about a minute long quote, actually, that he gave at his press conference during minicamp. And of course, it was, people always accuse Behind the Steel Curtain, a lot of sites of clickbait, and I don't really think they know what clickbait is when they say that. But in this case, this was clickbait. This is people going, "Oh my God," because it elicited a response. And people are like, "Oh, I can't believe they're caving to Ben's demands. Matt Canada, what they bring him in for? He's just a puppet." Well, I don't know if they actually said those words, but that was the sentiment. But I knew right away, before I even watched Matt Canada's interview, that this was, I don't want to say taken out of context, but it's not exactly what he meant. He wasn't up there going, "Well, what am I even doing here? At the end of the day, we're going to let Ben Roethlisberger do what he wants." That's not what he meant. And I knew it wasn't what he meant. And when I listened to the whole thing, when I read the whole thing in its entirety, I was proven right. That's not what he meant. What he basically meant, meaning Matt Canada, he meant that at the end of the day, once they formulate this new philosophy of his, whatever that turns out to be, we have a general idea. It's going to focus on running and jet sweeps and motion and this and that and the other. at the end of the day, they're gonna find what works best for Ben Roethlisberger, what he's most comfortable with, and that's what they're gonna do, by and large. And why wouldn't they? He's been freaking Roethlisberger. He's been in the league. This will be year number 18. He's a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's won 2 Super Bowls. He's been to 3. He's thrown for 60,000 yards in his career. 2 touchdowns to 1, or maybe it's 3 to 1 as far as touchdowns to interception ratio. I forget what it is. It's probably not 3 to 1. It's 2 to 1. I did all these stats last week. But anyway, why wouldn't they do that? Why would anybody think that Ben Roethlisberger, even though he took a pay cut, even though he maybe only has 1 year left, why did anybody think that they would totally overhaul the offense and make it so confusing for him that he has to learn everything from scratch? That just would not make good business sense at this stage. If they want to win, then they wouldn't do that. And if they wanted to start from scratch, totally from scratch, and force feed their quarterback everything that they want that they want Matt Canada's offense to be, then they probably wouldn't have brought Ben back. It just wouldn't have made any sense. So it's only natural that you're going to want your veteran quarterback, your 39-year-old quarterback, the guy who's accomplished so much in the league. It only makes sense you're going to want him to be comfortable, and you're going to want him to do the things that that are his strengths. You're going to want to cater to his strengths, even though you're trying to tweak and change the offense. When they brought Matt Canada in, when they got rid of Randy Fichtner, they didn't do so because they were looking to start from scratch. They did so because they wanted to improve upon last year and how last year ended, and how predictable everything became by the last 7-8 weeks, and how the offense went from one that was scoring 30 points a game to some weeks they were lucky if they got out of the teens. They wanted to tweak it, to fix it, to become more unpredictable, to become more creative. Matt Canada even said in that press conference the other day to create better matchup problems for the opposing defenses. That's what the goal was, in my opinion. It was to just get better, not to start over. So if you're in the market for, or in the business of getting better, then you don't ask your Hall of Fame quarterback to start over. That just wouldn't make any sense. And this is the same thing 10 years ago when they got rid of Ben's real buddy, Bruce Arians. I don't know if Fichtner and him were best buds like Big Ben and Arians were, probably still are. But when they got rid of BA 10 years ago, or I guess 9 years ago, technically, a lot of people thought it was going to be that way with Todd Haley, that he was going to come in and be this taskmaster with then 30-year-old quarterback Ben Roethlisberger. And yeah, he had to tweak his game, and he got better, but they didn't radically change the offense. They changed some elements of it. They asked him to get rid of the ball quicker, but they didn't make him become a totally different quarterback than what he was comfortable with being. And they're not going to do that this year either. They're just not. So, and I saw that quote again, to repeat, I knew exactly what it meant, and I knew it was taken out of context, and I knew what Matt Canada was trying to convey there, and that's they were gonna create an offense that Ben was most comfortable. They were gonna change it a little bit, but they were gonna tweak it, but they weren't gonna overhaul it. But he also wasn't saying that whatever Ben wants, Ben gets to do. He meant in the framework of his system, whatever Ben's comfortable with, that's what they're going to go with. And why? And again, why wouldn't they? So that's the first thing I wanted to touch on. I think it's pretty straightforward, and I think it's indicative of this time of year. We're just searching for news. We're searching for any kind of controversy, and I love controversy. I've said that before. I'm a big fan of stirring the pot, but that's on stuff that's actually happening. Not stuff that I think is a load of BS. And I think this whole thing that we've always had with the quarterbacks at Pittsburgh, where we want them to show deference to the coaches, Like I saw somebody, I think it's Dave Schofield, wrote an article after the Matt Canada quote made news. And I think one of the first or second people to comment on that story on Behind the Steel Curtain said, oh, Ben should just shut up and do what his bosses tell him to do. Do what the guys who know better tell him to do. Oh, really? You think Matt Canada knows more than Ben Roethlisberger does? I mean, maybe it's equal, but Ben Roethlisberger is pretty darn accomplished quarterback. I think he knows what he's doing out there. So if he didn't, he wouldn't have had the career that he's had. That's another misconception about Big Ben, is that people think that he's just gotten by for the last almost 2 decades just on pure skill and not caring about his conditioning and not caring about studying and any of that stuff. You don't make it to this point the way he has with the kind of things that he's accomplished, stats-wise, in terms of championships, in terms of just winning week in and week out, without knowing what you're doing, without putting in the work, both in the film room and on the practice field and the weight room and out on the road running or whatever. You don't make it. You don't have the kind of career that Ben Roethlisberger has had just on going out there and just winging it. If you want to know an example of that, maybe Jay Cutler is a great example. You always see the pictures and the memes of him with the cigarette hanging out of his mouth. I mean, they're not real, but I'm sure he might smoke, but never when he's wearing a football uniform. But if you want an example of somebody who maybe didn't take his talent seriously, didn't take the NFL seriously, it was Jay Cutler. Ben Roethlisberger is a completely different story, and that'll probably always be his the cross he has to bear for the rest of his career and after he's done playing until he leaves this earth. People are always going to just assume that he was a guy who got along just purely on skill and not on being disciplined. And there are people that say, well, if he would be serious about his as serious as Tom Brady and all these other guys and Peyton Manning, he'd have 10 Super Bowls, because that's just how all the Steelers fans think. They think that their guy's always the best, and the only thing holding him back are these intangibles or these other things that because they're not focused 24/7, 365, or they think they're not focused enough. So I don't know. It's just a little rant I wanted to start the show with, but it's pretty much all I had to say about that. And after I take a look at the live chat, I'll get into my second topic. Dave Shipley's here. And Clarence Washington, he says, Tony time. And I couldn't agree more. It is Tony. I had another rough night getting onto the computer. I like to be on right at 9 o'clock. I'm a Taurus. I'm a creature of habit. I want to be on right at 9, but I didn't get on to like 9:03 because I couldn't. I had to start over. I had to restart my computer. And Steeler Pittsburgh says, you are a true Yinzer, and that's a good thing. I thank you. I think. I don't know. Maybe I'm just. Is it my accent? I don't know. But I thank you for that. So, Steeler fan 36 says clickbait was the GoDaddy commercials with Danica Patrick, the famed female race car driver. I don't remember those commercials. Are they new or are they older commercials? T Money, my man Terry, just hung out with him the other day. Actually, we talked sports. I think, yeah, we always talk sports. But Terry's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to Pittsburgh sports. He knows everything. He knows it all. He's seen a lot of stuff over the years. And here's one from Dave Shipley about my first topic. And he says the Roonies would never hire an offensive coordinator without collaborating with Ben Roethlisberger. Thank you, Tony. Yeah, they're not going to just. There's always been that attitude with not just Steeler fans, but I think it's a Pittsburgh sports fan mentality, that blue collar mentality, that the quarterback is too big for he can't be too big for his britches. He can't be better than the rest of the team. And nobody's really saying that the quarterback's better than the rest of the team. But if you're talking about importance, and I've said this many times, a good accomplished, talented franchise quarterback is the most indispensable and most important part of any football organization when he's with that organization. I don't care if it's Tom Brady, even Eli Manning, obviously Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, all those guys, Johnny Unitas, Terry Bradshaw, all throughout history. When that guy's under your employ, then he's the most indispensable part. It doesn't mean he gets to have free reign, but to sit there and just say, you do this, you do as I say, and we don't care about your input, Ben. We don't want to work with you. We want to force this system on you. We want you to do what we say, and it goes against logic. So, yeah. Anyway, my next topic is about another hot button figure, and that's Le'Veon Bell. If you remember last weekend, he made news because he took to Twitter to say in so many words that he would never work or he would never play for Chiefs head coach Andy Reid again. He would retire first. And I read an article about this a few days ago. It hasn't been published yet, but basically my sentiment was you should just hurry. The title of the article was you should hurry up and retire, Le'Veon Bell, because you're washed up. You're through. You're done. It's over. To quote Don Rickles when he would always roast Frank Sinatra or Dean Martin, kid them about their voices. Your voice is gone. It's over. It's time to move on. Quit bothering the people. And that's true with Le'Veon Bell. He's shot. That's his problem, and he's in denial about it. He's in denial about the fact that his skills have eroded and he's just not useful anymore. I mean, it started in 2017. I mean, he had a really productive year in 2017. He did what he had been doing up till then as a Steeler running back, and that he gained almost 2,000 yards from scrimmage, both receiving and pass catching. But it took him a lot longer to accomplish that goal. It took him. He was a lot less efficient. He averaged one less yard per carry, or almost one less yard per carry, 0.9 to be exact. His longest run that year was like 27 yards. I looked up the stats the other day when I did the article. It was either 27 or 23. Either way, he clearly wasn't a breakaway. I mean, he never had blazing speed, Le'Veon Bell, but I mean, he was not the same explosive player in 2017 that he had been the year before. And even after holding out all of 2018, he really wasn't the same player in 2019 with the Jets. His longest run that year was 19 yards, and you could attribute it to it being the Jets. And the Jets are awful and they're a joke of a franchise, and that's mostly true. But still, if you're a truly talented and explosive running back, you don't just putter around the league for 3 or 4 years. And last year he rushed for 254 yards total, something like that, or maybe 324, whatever it was. He was a non-factor as far as an NFL running back. So he's just done. And, I really have nothing bad to say about Le'Veon Bell because I cherished those 3 or 4 years where he was the main cog in Pittsburgh's offense as far as a skill position player. He was who the offense flowed through. There's no question about it. Antonio Brown was obviously the best receiver in the game, but the offense was designed to flow through Le'Veon Bell from the time he debuted in early 2013 through the time he left here in 2017. In those prime years, 2014 through 2016, there was nobody that did it better than him. Nobody in the history of the Steelers franchise that was as productive as Le'Veon Bell as far as running backs. Even Franco, I don't want to get into specific yardage, but as far as just what he meant to an offense for those 3 years, it's hard to top what he did. As far as being a dual threat, running the ball and catching the ball, he was spectacular. So I'll always be grateful, and I'll be grateful for how he carried the offense down the stretch in 2014 when they missed the playoffs the previous 2 years. They kind of got off to a shaky start in 2014, and they decided to really make Bell. Todd Haley decided to really make Bell the main focal point of his offense to to dismay of LeGarrette Blount, who walked off the field late in that Tennessee Monday night game and was ultimately cut. 2 years later, when they were injury depleted, their wide receivers were hurt, except for basically Antonio Brown. It was just him and a bunch of down the liners at receiver. They really rode Bell over those last. Remember, they were 4-5. They had lost 4 in a row, and they decided to make him the focal point. And he carried them all the way through to the AFC Championship game. He set single game marks for rushing yards in the playoffs in back-to-back games in the wild card round against the Dolphins, and then the divisional round a week later against the Chiefs. But he suffered a torn groin at some point, and he had to have surgery in the offseason. So he was never quite the same after that. But people want to quibble over the money that the Steelers offered him versus what he ultimately got from the Jets. And maybe at the end of the day, he would have earned more with Pittsburgh, but I'm not even sure if he would have. I'm not sure if he would have, if they would have kept him around long enough for him to earn that contract that he turned down. I think 2 contracts that he turned down in 2017 and 2018. He was after guaranteed money. He was trying to reset the market for running backs. Some might say he did so in a negative sense. But I kind of saw his point. The NFL is rough on running backs. They take their best years, which are usually their first 4 or 5 years. They chew them up at a cheaper price, and then when it's time for them to get paid, nobody wants to touch them. So I don't know who you can blame in that circumstance, the NFL or the player, because you can't blame the player for wanting more money for all the work and all the production that he put in over his first contract. But can you blame the team for not wanting to pay him top dollar when he's clearly a shell of his former self? So I don't know, what his legacy will ultimately be in Pittsburgh. A lot of people will say that, what could have been with Le'Veon Bell. But I think he was just another cautionary tale for anybody who wants to be a running back. I mean, you're doing so at your own peril, because generally those guys do run out of steam well before their 30s. I mean, a lot of NFL players do at varying positions, but that's really the case for running backs. Most of them anyway. The truly great ones can hang in there and have lengthy careers by and large, but for the most part, running backs, his prime years aren't going to go far beyond half a decade. So I think it's time for Bell to retire. Just shuffle off into the sunset and just call it a career. I mean, he's obviously in some athletes are the last to know that they're done, and he's obviously done. So, unless he just wants to keep collecting a paycheck as a backup somewhere over the next 3 or 4 years, just going from team to team to team as a perennial backup, he should just retire. He's made a decent amount of money. What else does he have to prove? Because he can't be a starter anymore. Running backs don't just regain their legs after 3 or 4 years. It's usually once they fall off the cliff, they continue to fall. So best of luck to Le'Veon. I think he has. I actually think he has the potential to be a wise person when he gets older. I think he might be one of those people. A lot of people think he's gonna go on and be a tragic tale, like a lot of people were assuming Antonio Brown's gonna wind up in that situation. But I think Lev Bell, I think he has a decent enough head on his shoulders. He's 29 now, so he's not a kid anymore. But there's still obviously some room for maturity, and I think he can grow up. He was very popular here with his teammates in the media. And when you hear the media saying good things about somebody, and they're not afraid to come out and defend a former player, that tells me that maybe he's not such a bad guy, because the media, once a player leaves town, they're not shy about telling you how they feel about somebody. In a lot of cases, they're not shy about doing that when the guy's still here, as we found out with Barry Bonds many years ago, and even Antonio Brown near the end of his Steeler career. So Again, best of luck to Lev Bell. Thanks for the memories, but hang up those cleats. That's just my advice. Middle-aged podcaster, you're probably not listening to me, but if you hear this, I always remember specifically 2016, that run you had at the end of that year. That was fantastic. So thank you for that. And on that note, I will close out the first half of this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook Live, please stay with me. I'm not going anywhere. If you're listening on an audio platform, I thank you for downloading part 1. But please stick around and download part 2 of this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I will be right back. And welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I am your host, as always, Tony Defio. I thank you for sticking with me on YouTube or Facebook if you're watching live. If you're listening on an audio platform, I thank you for downloading part 2. Here we are. If you're listening after the fact, I don't know what day it is, but as I'm taping this or streaming this, I guess it's called, it's June 18th. So that means we're about 5 weeks away from training camp. So I certainly can't wait for that. And before I get on to my next couple of subjects, I just want to take some live chat comments. And here's one from Awesome Stuff 1983. It's about Juju Smith-Schuster and his relationship with the media, or perceived relationship. And he says, it seems like some in the media believe Juju to be two-faced, another guy off camera. Maybe that's true. But I don't really, like, despite what I said earlier about how some in the media were fond of Lev Bell, I don't always necessarily feel like if the media doesn't like somebody that he's a bad guy. Just that maybe he and the media don't get along. Just because the media doesn't like a player doesn't mean the player is an evil person. I guess, if you're dealing with the media all the time and they're always asking questions and you go and read about what they say about you and you don't have your skin's not as thick as it should be, then I can see why you would get upset. A lot of coaches have bad relationships. If you ever listen to a press conference, most head coaches are pretty darn condescending to the media when they talk to them. Mike Tomlin's a great example. Bill Cowher was that way. Chuck Noll was that way. There are a lot of coaches around the NFL that are pretty, I think, mean-spirited towards the media when they do their press conferences. And I don't hear people calling them bad guys just because, they're mean to the reporters. So, but I have heard that about Juju. I've heard that, he's one way on camera and one way off, but is that the case, or is he just one way when he's with the media? Is he kind of guarded with the media? I don't know. But in any event, my next topic is about might be boring to you, but it's about memories. And as I said a few minutes ago, it's June 18th as I'm talking right now, and it's one of those quote unquote slow news days for the most part, and it's a slow time of the year for the NFL. So it's about memories. And I just want to share my one favorite memory of the NFL, or I'm sorry, of the USFL. And that was the 1984 season, the one and only season of the Pittsburgh Maulers. They were an expansion team. The USFL was only in its second year. So to call the Maulers an expansion team was kind of a stretch, but no pun intended. But they were an expansion team. They were a new team, and they played at Old Three River Stadium. And to be quite honest, as far as any games from that year, and they finished 3-15, tied for the worst record in the league, I don't really have many memories of any actual games, even though I watched a lot of the games that year. My only memory of the USFL, as far as the Maulers were concerned, is the fact that they drafted and signed Mike Rozier, who was a 1983 Heisman Trophy Award winner. He was a running back from Nebraska. And I actually watched that guy play for years, and I was in awe. Like, I can still go back to early 1984 and feel how in awe I was that the Maulers actually signed Mike Rozier. Because, I had watched the Steelers up for about 5 years up to that point, and nobody that they ever drafted. Let me rephrase it. I had never heard of anybody that they had ever drafted up to that point. Nobody. Mark Malone, Keith Gary, Walter Abercrombie. I didn't know any of them. Gabe Rivera. I didn't know any of those guys. And of course, any of the lower round picks. I didn't. I was starstruck that they got this guy, and that he was going to play in the USFL. And it didn't work out in the end for Rozier as a USFL player. He went on to the NFL, had an okay career, not a great career. He rushed for like 4,000 yards. He just certainly didn't live up to his college career, but that was what was so special about that 84 season, is there were so many stars in that league who played that year that would go on and have great careers in the NFL. Reggie White was in that. I don't know if he played in 84 or not, but he was in that league. Of course, Steve Young in 1984, he signed the biggest contract in the history of sports up to that point. And he ultimately went on to have a Hall of Fame career with the 49ers. Jim Kelly was in the USFL in 1984. He shunned the Bills. He didn't want to play in the cold weather city in Buffalo, so he went and played for the Houston Gamblers. And he was the Rookie of the Year in the league MVP. He threw for 44 touchdowns and 5,100 yards. And he was, of course, Jim Kelly's from Pittsburgh. And later that year, Dan Marino, who's also from Pittsburgh, went to Pitt. He played obviously for the Dolphins in the NFL, and he went on and passed for 5,000 yards and 48 touchdowns. And he was named NFL MVP. So for 1 year, the two best quarterbacks in the world and the two best quarterbacks in terms of stats up to that point ever both resided were both from Pittsburgh. So I thought that was pretty neat. But the Maulers ultimately disbanded. Ed DeBartolo, who was the former Penguins coach, he's obviously passed away now. He did not want to go head to head with the Steelers because the USFL was trying to go, for whatever reason, they were trying to go head to head with the NFL and play in the fall, which to me was a dumb move. I think they had a nice thing going, playing in the spring. And I think if they would have continued to do so, they would have found a nice niche for themselves. And I think, they might have ultimately become a true rival, because they were taking the NFL's players away from them. Steve Young, it was a place to go for NFL players who were looking to actually make money. Because these owners were intent on at least financially going out and drafting and signing superstar players, named players, which, the leagues that you have out there today, these spring football leagues, the AAF a couple of years ago, the XFL, they can't afford to do that. I just learned recently that the USFL was coming back into it was coming back in 2022, and that's fine and all, but the name is and sounds neat, but unless they can find like 10 billionaire owners, it's not going to be quite like the old USFL, because they're not going to be able to compete financially with the NFL. And I think it was Doug Flutie that described it as a football alternative for guys who don't want to play in the NFL, but it really should have said for guys who couldn't make it in the NFL, because all the new USFL is going to really be able to attract are players like Landry Jones. You're not going to be able to pry for example, a Doug Williams away from the NFL, that kind of caliber of a player, or even a Jim Smith, the Steelers' number 3 receiver back in the early 80s. He went and played in the USFL because they offered him a lot of money and he had a chance to start. Well, a player like that today is just going to go to another team as a free agent, another NFL team. So that's pretty much all I had. I just wanted to talk about the USFL, and now we'll open things up to some questions and comments to round out the show. So let's see what you guys have. And here's one from Brian Brown, and he asks, did Rozier play for the Oilers at one time? Yes, for several seasons. I think he finished up with the Falcons. But yeah, he was a part of a stable of backs that the Oilers had at one point. They're like, man, how'd they get all these players on one roster? It was pretty amazing. There was him, Lorenzo White, a couple other guys. I can't think of their names, but yeah, they were. If you remember those late '80s Oilers teams, they had talent everywhere. It's amazing that they never even made it to an AFC Championship game. It just shows you that talent alone isn't what it takes. It takes a lot of there's a lot that goes into winning a title in the NFL. Let's see what else we have here. Here's one from Mark Tobin. And he says, I don't think Le'Veon was greedy. I think he did what he thought was best for him, and you have to do that in this league. That's true. You do. Because, the fans are always going to side with the team when it comes to contract disputes because they have to. They don't have a choice. The team is kind of like their parent, whereas the players, like a friend or a girlfriend or boyfriend, they come and go. But the parent's always going to be there. Anyway, Mark continues, but Le'Veon needed to not be disrespectful towards coaches that gave him a chance. I don't know. I agree. I don't know why he would burn bridges like that with Andy Reid and say he would never play for him again, and then hint that Andy Reid said something awful to him or something disrespectful. I don't know what he said, but if you're going to say that, at least tell us what he said. The only thing I could think of is Andy Reid said, "You're done, Le'Veon. You stink. You're done. You're washed up." That's probably what he said to him in so many words. Not those exact words, but he probably essentially told him that he was washed up and he had to get on with his life's work. And maybe Le'Veon didn't take too kindly to that. So what else we have here? And here's one from Steelers Pittsburgh about Matt Canada. Does it concern you that Matt Canada has been in so many college programs and not staying that long? I mean, a little, I guess, but if you look at most coaches, I mean, it's almost like a gypsy kind of existence. Most assistant coaches and coordinators, they move from team to team to team to team to team for years before they stick with somebody that for any length of time. It's just the life of an assistant coach. It's the life often of a head coach. It's the life of any coach. You go from being a coordinator to a coach, back down to a coordinator. Maybe you become a position coach again, and you go from team to team to team. So does it really concern me? I guess a little, but at the same time, he was maybe trying to find his niche. Maybe he was moving around to find the best fit for him, or maybe he didn't mesh with his bosses. Who knows? I don't know. I mean, this is his first crack as an NFL coordinator. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what he does at this level. But, it concerns me a little, but not a lot. And what else we have? Let's scroll back up. Here's one from George Teston. And it's funny you say that because I just watched the a Football Life episode of that, the Immaculate Reception, about 2 hours ago. And he asked, was the Immaculate Reception a good play in your eyes? Yes. Because if you and I read this in some book like 10 years ago, once that ball touched Jack Tatum, and it clearly touched Jack Tatum, they could say all they wanted, it didn't. But Jack Tatum touched that football, whether it touched him, whether it touched Frenchie Fuqua or not, it doesn't matter. Because once Jack Tatum touched it, then that whole rule that existed back in the early 70s where two offensive players couldn't touch the ball consecutively, that was out the window. Number one. And number two, there's no way of it was such a close play that there's no way of saying that it was good or it wasn't good. And that's what always cracks me up about the Raiders is they've been complaining about it for almost 50 years now. Wow. I'm almost 50. I'm not even 50 yet, so I'm glad it's not 50 quite yet. But 49 years they've been complaining about that play. And it wasn't like it was like there's ever been any evidence to suggest that there's anything about that play that was not on the up and up. Did Franco trapped the ball? You can't tell. Did it just touch Frenchie Fuqua alone? And not Jack Tatum? You can't really tell. I think there's a stronger case to make that it did touch Tatum, and that it maybe never even grazed off of Frankie Fuqua, But Chuck Noll described why that touched Tatum years ago. He said it was he explained it in the law of physics. I think that's how he did it. He was much smarter than I'll ever be, but he explained it in a nice, rational, logical manner that. It's like resultant forces. That's how he described it. If an object's going one direction, and it's going in and a person like touches it, who's going in the exact same direction, the ball is not going to just go deflecting backwards the other way. That only happens when somebody who's going in the opposite direction makes contact with the ball, and then it goes in the other direction. So, was it a good play? Yes. And to sum it up, it was a good play. Brian Brown asks, any news on Kendrick Green signing his rookie contract? Not that I've heard. Why he hasn't signed it, I don't know. It doesn't seem like there should be any drama whatsoever when it comes to any contract, any rookie contract nowadays, because they're all slotted. So I don't know what the holdup is. I honestly don't know why, but we have 5 weeks to go before training camp, so I'm sure it'll work things out before then. I have no idea. Maybe he's waiting on somebody else to sign before he signs. I don't know what the deal is. It just seems weird, but I'm not really privy to any new information. And Monica S says, I disagree, Tony. I don't know on what. I guess maybe the Immaculate Reception. I don't know. But what else we have here? Here's one from Jeff Surma, who says, another great show, Defio Lax, the Jarvis Jones of podcast. Well, I thank you. But I'm up here doing a show, and you're over there on Facebook trolling and making stupid names. So, even the eighth best sprinter in the world is still better than 99.9% of the other people who can run. So I'll take it as a compliment. And Defio Lax is a kind of a stupid name. It doesn't even roll off the tongue. You have to come up with something else for me if you want to really be insulting. Defio Lax. I mean, you wouldn't even sell that in a supermarket. If somebody was incontinent, suffering from incontinence, you wouldn't be able to sell Defio Lax to them. So, Steeler Pittsburgh says there wasn't instant replay or 15 different camera angles back then either. That's exactly right. So, Myron Cope always said that he found the WTAE footage shortly after the game, and he watched it over and over again. And he said for a fact, or he knew for a fact that that the ball didn't touch the ground. Franco didn't trap it. But of course, it's also that footage is also lost in time. Nobody knows where it's at. Bill Hogrove said it was basically it would be like trying to find a needle in a haystack. So good luck ever trying to find that. And George Teston says Green ain't getting any extra money. He might not want extra money. There could be any number of reasons why he hasn't signed a new deal. So, or I should say new deal, any deal, his rookie deal. Steeler Chick 46 says rookie contracts are pretty limited. That's true. They are now. They are. I mean, they reeled the spending in many years ago with that. So there could be any number of reasons why he hasn't signed a new deal. So I wouldn't worry about it. And looks like it's going to be a quiet night as far as any more comments and questions. So on that note, I will I will bid you adieu. And I will talk to you again on Monday evening with Brian Anthony Davis on the Steelers Hangover. And until then, please have a great weekend and stay out of trouble. And of course, as always, go Steelers. Thanks a lot, everybody.